Today we are making a commemorative video celebrating many subscribers on the new Acropolis YouTube channel. I've often shared this story with you. We launched the first channel some time ago. It has brought us many joys, though it's a very challenging endeavor in the beginning. Very few people were involved. We've been working persistently since the beginning with a very small audience, until at a certain point, people began to notice us and we started to grow. We began to engage in a very meaningful interaction with society. This video is to thank all of you who are helping us get to further and further, who are sharing our content with friends, and who are supporting everything we publish, who are sharing our content on your social media pages. You, the YouTube community, who are subscribed to the channel, send us your questions. And we selected some, of course, there were many, more than 200 questions. We selected some that focus on certain topics. And today's conversation, in celebration of reaching 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, will be a Q&A session with questions and answers that you sent in yourselves. Of course, I would love to answer all 200 questions, but that wouldn't be possible. So, I hope this selection, which was made with the intention of covering as many topics as possible, will be meaningful for you. The first question we selected says the following: how is it possible to live consciously in the face of everyday problems and the lack of values in the world? What would I say in response to that? How is it possible to live consciously? I would turn that question around and ask, how is it possible to live unconsciously in such a critical moment like this, when so many things and so many people are at risk? Just imagine, it's as if we were facing a war that's already set in motion. And we, from our historical moment, were to arrive in the middle of the battlefield with our pillow and blanket and fall asleep, unaware, right there in the midst of it all. This is a time when consciousness is not optional, it is imperative. We need to understand where we are, what brought us to this point, and be able to perceive, not driven by any social current, but through our own reflection and discernment, a solid and consistent path forward, free from hatred, free from rejection, a path that leads the human being ever upward, toward fulfilling their role as a human being. There is a great classic that I would say is one of the greatest literary treasures ever offered to humanity. It is Indian and called the Bhagavad Gita, and it speaks precisely about the human being in the midst of a battlefield. Reflecting on the two armies, contemplating the meaning of that war. That is the Bhagavad Gita. We are so disconnected that we have practically created our own version. In the midst of the battlefield, we are living the Bhagavad Gita, a state of doing nothing, of remaining alienated, of staying asleep. This is a moment in which awakening is imperative. It is a time when people of goodwill must take the reins of their own lives and begin to guide humanity toward the right path, toward the path of unity, toward the building of human character, toward the formation of an integral human being. Because that is the only way out of a crisis of this magnitude that we are experiencing, is for the human being to become much, much more human. It is time to awaken. This is a point I find very important, and I thank the person who asked this question. The second question, which the sender has already been identified, was asked by Elaine Oliveira. She asked, how can I tell the difference between intuition and emotion? Elaine, in truth, the issue is not distinguishing between intuition and emotion. It is identifying the difference between emotion and feeling, which are two emotional phenomena, or more precisely, two affective phenomena. But one is more superficial, with a very brief duration, while the other lasts much longer and has the power to move us, significantly guiding us toward our human condition. So, emotion is momentary and superficial. I often joke that emotion is what awakens during the romantic scene in a movie and fades away in the food court. It is impulsive, it responds to a stimulus, but it is not transformative, it doesn't go very far. A feeling, on the other hand, is something much deeper, something built consciously through an act of will. If there is one thing you can hold on to, because it is a principle shared by many philosophical traditions, it is that when consciousness takes part in the construction of something, that thing becomes much more enduring, it can be sustained, it can remain. Immanuel Kant himself used to say, in the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, that only what is shaped by an act of will holds true value. Aloud. That has been built through an act of will. In other words, only that has value, which has involved an act of will, a conscious act. I love. Do you know why? Because of who I am. I love because the world needs love. I love because it is a duty. I love because every being deserves to be loved. This does not exclude being just. It does not exclude giving each person what they need at each moment, but also to love. Let us not approach justice with a spirit of vengeance. Let us not impose punishment on someone in a way that removes any possibility of redemption that we'll see. So, feeling is this, a construction, consciously built and consciously sustained for the rest of one's life. It is also an emotional phenomenon. All of this is part of what we call our personality, which includes our most everyday thoughts, our common thinking. It includes the emotional world, our energies, and our physical body. Now, what is intuition? Intuition is when you are able to create a reasonable silence within your personality. When we manage to control our mind and our emotions a little, we can occasionally impose a mental quarantine. Enough noise. Let there be some silence. An emotional quarantine. Enough of the seesaw, the constant ups and downs. Let there be some silence, some serenity. When you impose this order, when a bit of silence is made in this concrete world of ours, the quaternary, as the Indians say, which is the personality, you can hear a voice that is almost a whisper. That which Helena Blavatsky referred to as the voice of silence. These are the perceptions we have that are not material. The perceptions of the meaning of the universe, the logic of life, the perceptions of that which is deep, true of that which lives within us, waiting to be discovered. In other words, intuition is a very gentle, very subtle voice that you can only hear when you manage to quiet the noise of the personality, the disorder of the personality. That's why I was joking the other day in one of my posts, saying that we desperately need someone to create a follow-up to Marie Kondo's magic of internal tidying up, because that's what we need more than anything else. Once our inner house is in order, we can begin to hear the voice of silence, which is intuition. It is a deep perception of the essence of all things, including our own essence. What else do we have here? William Ferreira. How can I know if I have attained? Wisdom. Look, Guilherme, let me tell you something. Knowing whether I have attained wisdom might be important at some point. But I would say that's not so important right now, because I believe that, except in extremely rare cases, it's very unlikely that any of us have truly attained anything significant in terms of wisdom. You know what concerns me today? It's whether we've made our inner ground barren from spending so much time crawling on the floor, obsessing over material things. Whether we still have, in our minds and in our hearts, fertile soil for wisdom. Whether there's still a chance for it to sprout there. Because sometimes we become so hardened, it's like that scorched desert ground where nothing can grow anymore. Now, one day, yes, we will have to examine whether or not we possess wisdom. And for that, I recommend the biblical phrase, "By your works, I will know you." I don't know if you've ever heard someone say it's rare, but it happens, say. I'm such a different person now. I've matured so much after that person came into my life, after that person taught me a few things. These people who are mentioned, if that's real, if it's not just a gesture of gratitude with little practical meaning, if it's real, if they truly left that kind of mark on someone else's life, then that person carries a great deal of wisdom. That story of, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be who I am. I feel a deep happiness in being able to say that. We have our School of Philosophy, New Acropolis, which just celebrated 36 years in Brazil on April 26th, and I can say with certainty to it, if it weren't for you, New Acropolis, I definitely wouldn't be who I am. So, through this expression of mine, which I believe is sincere, I believe that the group as a whole, through its continued effort over so many years around the world, must have acquired a small portion of wisdom. Well, a very small one, but it's already a starting point. Once the seed takes root, it becomes much easier to cultivate the plant. When it becomes a seedling, it's much easier to nurture it. What else? We have here a question from Akira. Or Akira, I'm not quite sure, as the name seems to be common to both genders, where they talk about the concept of resistance from Pressfield's book, The War of Art, by Stephen Pressfield. For those who don't know it, it's a gem of a book where he describes everything that holds us back, that prevents us from growing. He gives it the name resistance. These are the trials we must overcome in life in order to fulfill what we came here to accomplish. And then Akira says the following: should we really avoid them or face them as tests to see if we are ready for new stages in our lives? In other words, should we avoid the trials or face them? And I have a rather simple answer, Akira. Imagine you have a child who is in elementary school. He's going to have a math test. You who love him, who see things from a more mature perspective, who basically knows what is good for him. Would you want him to avoid the math test or to overcome it? Now imagine that the universe looks at us in the same way. When the trials, we become stuck along the path. We don't enter real time, we don't grow. Because what brought these trials into our lives was precisely our need for experience. Our need to grow. To avoid them is to surrender to stagnation. So at no point does the prayer say, avoid resistance. On the contrary, face it and overcome it. Be a professional, make it to the other side. Our fifth question comes from Evandro Hippolito, where he asks the following: how can one be happy knowing about the suffering of other human beings? Well, Hippolito, I would say this: shall we also try to reverse that question? Let's ask ourselves, how can one be happy while ignoring the suffering of other human beings? Just imagine other people's suffering is our concern. Whether we are aware of it or not, humanity is one family, and when someone suffers, it is our concern. Plato used to say that in his Republic. He would mix up the children of the guardians so that, at a certain point, one guardian would have 100 children. All those born around the same time would be considered his children. This means that each one of those children would be his responsibility. And each of those children would have 100 fathers, 100 mothers, 200 grandparents, and so on. There would come a time when the entire society would be related to one another. He says, this is already true, even now. And we must find a way to make what is already true become a truth in our consciousness. Knowing that our family includes many who are suffering, can do the one thing that is within our power. Happiness, which is commitment, giving our best every day, thinking about how I can contribute a little more, take responsibility, commit myself, grow in order to serve better, and sleep the sleep of the just, because I take responsibility and walk in that direction. Alienation can never be a source of true happiness. Imagine you're speaking with someone who is already there. Someone a bit older, I don't know, maybe in their 60s or 70s, and you ask them what were the happiest moments of their life. How surprised would you be if they answered, "Oh, it was when I was sleeping." Can you believe that? No one is truly happy while being alienated. Sure, sleep is necessary. But don't try to tell me that, beyond being necessary, it's the happiest moment of your life. Alienation does not bring happiness. Giving our best in everything life asks of us, doing today's homework well so that tomorrow life can entrust us with more complex tasks, just like at our child's school, being at peace with both heaven and earth each time we lay down to sleep at night, and on the day we lay down for the great sleep as well. That is happiness. In other words, it is the awareness of another's pain that ensures our own happiness. Lack of awareness guarantees nothing. Sleep can, at most, serve as a renewal of energy, but not happiness. So, it is human consciousness that makes a person truly happy, even more so in a matter such as this. What else do we have here? Lucia Lyon. She asks, could you speak about the trivialization of evil? Yes, Lucia, that is truly a wonderful question, and I thank you for asking it. Because the issue of trivialization is extremely dangerous. I always say that consciousness is born from contrast. This I am not, im. This comes from Eastern thought, which is the theory of impact. So, when within society you have very generous acts, very altruistic acts, alongside some selfish ones, you compare them and realize, wow, this is really good, and that is really bad. But in our current moment, I wouldn't even say that we only have bad actions. I don't believe that. But we do have a very morbid focus, and we practically only publicize what is evil. So, you open the daily newspaper, or the news in general, and all you see are various degrees of wrongdoing. This causes your sensitivity to it to gradually diminish. You lose the sense of contrast and end up trivializing it, no longer weighing the true gravity of what you're witnessing. The moral gravity of certain actions, I'm astonished by it. Sometimes I pick up the daily paper and am shocked. And when I talk to people about it, I see that they treat it as something trivial, but it's extremely serious, extremely serious. And by not recognizing it, we lose our ability to feel outraged. We end up becoming complacent and start thinking that this is normal. This is a typical moment for that to happen. This is a time when we should be deeply outraged. Do you know why? We are facing a real, violent situation. Thousands of people are dying. Don't you find it outrageous that some people are manipulating the situation for personal gain? Don't you find it scandalous that there are people who actually want the numbers to be high? In order to create an impact on society, sometimes even going so far as to inflate the numbers, falsify debt, gain personal advantage from the death of others. There are people out there trying to benefit from this, to promote their own name, to serve various interests, and this is happening all over the world. Don't you find that outrageous? Scandalous? That for some people, 100, 200, 300 deaths are reduced to just a statistic, and they use that to promote their own name? We're seeing this happening all over the world. And people aren't even shocked. What are 100 dead? They are 100 human beings, full of dreams, capable of transforming the world, free beings, with a vast capacity for awareness and infinite creativity. A human being is a force of potential, and you lose 100 of them. You lose 200, 300, and these numbers are tossed around with utter insensitivity, all for the sake of personal interests. Don't you see that? The whole world sees it. Well, see this happening everywhere. It reveals the level of barbarity, truly, the insensitivity of the world we live in. I don't see people as outraged as they should be. This is the trivialization of evil. We've lost our sense of gravity. Because we've lost the contrast. We are so bombarded every day with only the dark side of humanity that we become desensitized. We start to believe that evil, as a whole, is natural and inevitable, and that goodness doesn't exist. This deeply undermines our self-confidence. Growing as a human being, believing in yourself, is already far from easy. And without believing it's possible, it won't be possible. In other words, the trivialization of evil is a dangerous game. And yes, we experience this in a very real way. That's why I always tell my students, the people who follow me, when you hear about honorable acts, tell the four corners of the world. When you learn about honorable people, speak of them to the four corners of the world. We must restore in humanity the hope in humankind. Because otherwise, how can we work for it? Seventh question from Camilla Chance. Is it worth being a good person? An honest person? Camilla, imagine this. If we could go up to an apple tree and ask it, is it worth it to give apples? If we could ask the sun, is it worth it to give warmth and light? If we could ask a rose bush, is it worth it to give roses? It's incredible how we've lost sight of the fact that nothing is more worthwhile than living up to what nature expects of us. What could be more worthwhile for a human being than to be human and offer values to the world? None of these beings need anything else except the opportunity to fulfill themselves by doing what nature expects of them. Take a moment to imagine once again reversing the question, reducing it to the absurd, and asking, if we are not human, if we do not do what defines and distinguishes us in nature as human beings, which is to bring values to life, if we don't do that, what is left for us to do? And whatever is left, does it really matter? I believe that's a meaningful reflection. Certainly, if being human is not worthwhile for a man or a woman, then nothing else is. Because that is what nature intended for us. And every being fulfills itself by being what it truly is. What else do we have here? Question number 8. Lucas Santana. Are religion and philosophy conflicting forms of knowledge? Well, Lucas, there is a very ancient tradition that says humanity is built upon a civilizational pyramid. One of its faces is religion, another is science, another is politics, and yet another is art. These elements, although within each of these faces there are thousands of sub-options, these major faces are the ascending pillars of any civilization. They are absolutely essential. Then you might ask me, what about philosophy? What is it? Philosophy is not one of the faces. Philosophy is. It is a spiral that winds its way through the interior of this pyramid, touching all the faces, drawing out the best of each, and comparing them to create a synthesis of what can help elevate human consciousness. It weaves its way through, forming this spiral, and helps our consciousness reach the summit. So, religion is absolutely essential, but has everything that has been called religion throughout history truly been legitimate religion? Probably not. Who helps us discern that? Philosophy, which is the love of wisdom. Science is absolutely necessary. Politics is absolutely necessary. Art is absolutely necessary. Certainly, each of them is one of the supporting faces of the civilizational pyramid. But is everything that is called science, politics, and art truly what it claims to be? Or are there many deceptions in these fields as well? And how can you discern that? Who will help you with that? Philosophy, which seeks the essence of all things, establishing a comparative study among them until it reaches the summit. If a person refuses to acknowledge the value of art, science, politics, and religion in their purest form as pillars of civilization, someone who denies these four pillars, then philosophy will probably not be of much use to them. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, and civilization is the stage set by history so that we, within it, may seek wisdom. Well, we have our final question for today, which comes from Leandro Schemer. Schemer. I'm not sure. Apologies for the mispronunciation, Leandro. Has philosophy failed humanity? Now that's an interesting thing for you to reflect on, Leandro. Has philosophy failed humanity? Or was it humanity that failed not only philosophy, but all the proposals that were offered to it? Perhaps it didn't exactly fail, but rather didn't progress as far as it could have. There is a law that defines humanity, and that is free will. No one can violate this law. No one can force a human being to grow if they do not wish to. We have had great masters of wisdom throughout humanity. True wisdom beyond just seekers of wisdom, which is what philosophers are. None of them could force a man who did not desire wisdom to attain it. None of them could compel a man who did not wish to grow, to grow. And this is a trait that is characteristic of humanity. Precisely because human evolution is individual, it does not happen in herds. When we are presented with countless options and we choose, consciously, the best one that has merit. If someone forces you to choose an option, then it has no merit at all. The merit lies in discernment. Among 1,000 choices, I choose the most humane one. And that means growth. But for that, you must be able to choose. There would be no value in someone dragging us along, even though well in a society that loves, above all else, comfort and the path of least resistance. If someone tells you they're going to drag you toward evolution, that they'll pull you along on skates or push you forward, you can be sure you're dealing with a deceptive miracle worker, because no one can do that. And it's a good thing that no one can, because if we were dragged or pushed toward evolution, we would arrive just as ignorant as we are today. It would simply be ignorance relocated to a different place. There is only one path to growth on our own 2 feet. No one can force us to grow, not philosophy, nor anyone else. Socrates, who was a great philosopher, has a story I always tell. On one occasion, someone asked him if ignorant people were tied to a chair and he spoke to them for 3 hours, would they become wise? And he replied, "My mother was an excellent midwife, but she could never deliver a baby from a woman who wasn't pregnant." In other words, no one can be forced. Nothing can be born within a person who hasn't cultivated their own inner pregnancy, who isn't seeking wisdom, who doesn't thirst for it. Even less so could philosophy ever accomplish that. Therefore, philosophy has never failed anyone. Philosophy is an attribute of human nature, alive and conscious in many. And when that attribute awakens within a human being, you can be sure this is someone who will fight for humanity until their last breath. That is something truly wonderful. But not even with all that willpower, imagination, love, and intelligence which, according to Plato, are the great human attributes, even then, one cannot force anyone to grow. Well, everyone, with that, we wrap up for today. I selected only a few questions, but they are meaningful and important. And they cover a good portion of the topics we discussed. Once again, I want to emphasize to you that we work diligently to bring you something new every week, new Acropolis Plateo on YouTube and through our social media posts. All of it is for you. Regarding new Acropolis Plateo, people often ask, well, is the 20 reis per month for the same content? No, it's different content created specifically for that platform. And 20 reis per month, 20 reis and 90 cents, that's not even enough for a good ice cream at the mall. And with that, you're supporting a fantastic social initiative. I hope you'll walk this path with us, that the 400 become 500, 600, even 1,000,000 one day. That you'll add your strength so we can reach even more people. Certainly, philosophy is a wonderful tool to support humanity. And well, give it our all. But we won't get very far if you're not able to carry these seeds everywhere. If you don't help us cultivate philosophy in as many human beings as you can, your impact is immense. Thank you very much.